Hello and welcome to NB Drives. My name is Nishmanya and this is the 2024 Skoda Kushaq. Now the Kushaq's always been an important car for Skoda as it was designed to drive volumes in terms of numbers of sales for the brand. And to that extent, they also used a chassis developed specifically for our country called the MQB A0IN. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but that meant its packaging, the way it was designed to be cost effective, all those things were made specifically so that it could sell well in India. And now 2 years after its launch, can it still deliver in a market that is so competitive and has something like the Hyundai Creta dominating the segment, which is the midsize SUV segment. So I'll quickly walk you through everything there is to know about the Skoda Kushaq and tell you whether it's still worth buying in 2024. Before we get any further into this review, I will say that this car has been borrowed from my local Skoda dealership, hence the stickering on the side. They've been kind enough to lend it to me for an extended period for this review, so big shout out to Mahavir Skoda. Now under the hood, the model I'm driving has the 1.5 litre 4-cylinder TSI engine. However, you do get a 1 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine as well. The specs on this one I have put up on the screen. It makes 150 horsepower and 250 Newton meters of torque. This model comes paired to a 7-speed dual clutch automatic gearbox. The manual that you used to get, the 6-speed manual, has been discontinued for the time being on the 1.5 TSI. So the suspension of the Kushaq is set up on the firmer side, as you'll be able to see now. I'm going over some not very bad stretches, but it's a broken patch of road and I can definitely feel the car shake under me and sort of toss me around side to side. Here's another example of doing some bad roads and you can definitely feel it. And if you can feel it from the front seats, especially from behind the steering wheel, then that means the passengers in the back will also feel it. And from the little sample I've had in the rear seat earlier today, it definitely can be felt when you're going over bad roads, and that's not a very good thing, especially if you want to be chauffeur driven. Let's quickly talk about the steering of the Kushaq, and this is gonna leave people a little confused in the sense that it is a rather light unit, and this means that it's really easy to chuck the car around town. It feels very easy to move around, maneuver. It's so light and it'll honestly not cause any issues in your daily commute and bumper to bumper traffic. But on the flip side, the steering being so light leaves it a little numb and feels like it doesn't communicate a whole lot. What that means is it feels like it's got sort of a split personality. On one end, the suspension is set up for you to drive a little more spiritedly, while the steering feels like it wants you to be more laid back and sort of cruise. This makes 3-point turns and U-turns such as this in the city a breeze. It is so easy to turn this car around, and because of the good turning radius also, you can basically have no issues taking tight U-turns on roads such as these. And while I said that the steering is fairly light, it does weigh up as you pick up speed. So for instance, now I'm going at about 60, 70, and it definitely has weighed up, but it still leaves you wanting a little more in terms of weight and feedback, especially for people who are really enthusiastic about driving and want to hustle it around a set of corners. And I feel like that split personality doesn't work super well for the Kushaq because it has the potential, especially this 1.5 litre, has the potential of being a very, very good enthusiast car because it does handle well, only the steering's a little numb, and it does have one of the best engines in the class. Without a shadow of a doubt, the best part about the Kushaq is its engine. This 1.5 liter TSI is a very, very potent engine. It's got a very strong mid-range and you have ample torque on offer. And one of the best parts about it is that you can be pretty much anywhere in the rev range and it will give you the power. Like, you can get a move on. The only one downside to it is that it is a little on the noisy side. So like right now, if I put my foot down, so you can hear that a fair bit, but that does add to a little bit of the sportiness that it offers. And on the whole, I think this is one of the best engines you can get in this mid-size SUV segment. It also has so much stability out on the highway, which I was driving earlier. Now, we can't talk engine without talking gearbox, and this 7-speed DSG or dual clutch automatic gearbox is a really good DSG unit. But it has the typical traits of a dual clutch gearbox, which is at low speeds it feels a little jerky, in the sense that it takes a little while to just kick into gear, and your crawl speeds are not particularly good. So in stop and go slow speed traffic, you will feel it lurch forward, but when you get going, it is phenomenally quick. The shifts are lightning fast and it is buttery smooth when you're rowing through the gears under load. It really will leave enthusiasts with a big smile on their face. Though I do have to say that all in all, everything considered, this car is a real treat to drive around twisty roads such as these. The engine gearbox just egg you on to drive a little faster, and the chassis keeps up with the car. The only thing that feels like it's a little out of place in this entire package is the steering, but it's not bad. And also worth noting is that a lot of people say that the 1 liter is the better car to drive. I've fortunately been able to drive all versions of the Kushaq, and yes, there is a 5 to 10% difference, but I don't think it's enough for it to be a deciding factor for people who are keen drivers to pick that over the 1.5, because the 1.5 liter engine is just so much better in terms of its performance. Before we get into the design, I'd love to know what is your favorite looking midsize SUV in the comment section below. The Kushaq's always been a handsome car, and that's evident when you glance at its overall proportions and styling. It's very smart, and even though it's been out in our market for about 2 years, it still looks very present and looks very stylish. Now, to that extent, a few things that stand out up front is, one, the traditional Skoda grille. It is finished in chrome for most of the models, apart from the Sportline trim, which gets gloss black accents. Another thing you'll notice up here is the headlights. Now, they do look like split headlight units, but it's actually more of a traditional double barrel headlight up here with LED DRL running just below it. And this is actually the fog light, not a secondary headlight. We're used to seeing fog lights down here, but Skoda decided otherwise, and I think it still looks fairly upmarket. Down here you do get a 4 skid plate that's plastic. It's not actually metal, as you would expect in most cars in this segment. They don't really get skid plates, they're not off-roaders. You get an air dam down here. The grille slats don't open all the way. Interestingly, I'll show you a close-up of the grille itself. They only open about halfway, which you won't notice if you see it from a distance. It's only something you'll catch when you come up close to the Kushaq. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the clamshell hood. It's very well sculpted, and there is also a power bulge, which makes it look fairly sporty. Now, talking about the design on the side of the Kushaq, you can see its proportions look quite nice. The wheels are basically at either end of the car, and the overhangs both at the front and rear are fairly short. Interestingly, a lot of people say that the Kushaq looks small, and I can see that it's visually manages mass really well compared to some of its competitors. That can be either a positive or a negative for you. If you want your SUVs to be big and brawny, this is not it. This looks fairly compact, and despite having more or less the same dimensions as a Creta, which is only marginally longer than it and slightly wider, the Kushaq does look like it's more compact, which in reality, I'll put the dimensions up on the screen right now, it really isn't. Most of the length is actually covered between the wheelbase, which is more than most of its competitors. Now, in terms of design, there are a few things that I want to point out. There is a nice chrome accent that runs across the window line here and kinks up at the rear. Another thing I like is the shoulder line. It's very sharply creased, and it runs all the way from the tail lights up to the Skoda logo up front. There's not much else to talk about on this side apart from the roof rails that are finished in silver. And on this specific model, you get fairly basic looking 5-spoke alloy wheels, though on certain models like the Sportline, you get nicer finished diamond cut alloys. I'll insert the photo here. I like those a little better than these, but on the whole, this does look like a smart package from the side. The rear of the Kushaq has a fairly straightforward design. There isn't a lot to make it look very busy, but the lines used are quite sharp. As you can see in the tail lights around here, there's a lot of nice texturing done. I'll show you a close-up. There are some cuts in the tail light inserts which make it look more three-dimensional than a lot of other competitors out there. Another thing you'll notice back here is the use of more chrome just lining the boot lid at the bottom. There's an integrated spoiler and a shark fin antenna up top, but at the rear there's not much else. You can't see any of the tailpipes, despite this being the sportier of the models, given that it's got the 1.5 litre in it. And down here you do get another 4 skid plate at the rear. Again, finished in a silver color, but again, it's not a real metallic skid plate. You also interestingly get these reflectors just under the tail light that end up forming like a C shape, but these don't light up on their own. The boot of the Kushaq on paper is quite small. However, in reality, it's actually got ample space for at least 2 large suitcases or 3 to 4 overnight bags. Now, another interesting thing if you come close is that the toolkit that Skoda has provided has these Velcro patches underneath it. So that means when you do put it down, it doesn't move around in the boot while you're driving. Same for your warning triangle. And your subwoofer is actually placed inside your spare wheel. This actually improves the sound quality a fair bit. However, the one thing you have to note is the load lip here is quite high. So when you do put bags in, it's going to take a little bit of lifting over and your bag's going to get an exercise. That said, if you want to increase the amount of cargo space you have in here, you can just topple the front seats quite easily from back here, and you can then move your parcel shelf out of the way and you've got a fairly large cargo space. Though again, there is a load lip in here, so it'll be tough to push long or heavy items all the way to the front. However, this is a very convenient feature, especially when you're moving a lot of stuff around, like shifting houses. Step inside the Kushaq and you'll be greeted with a very nicely laid out dashboard. I really like how it's been finished. It's got this really nice layered design with almost this knurled inlay, which looks really nice in person. The only thing I'm not a big fan of is the shiny black, gloss black plastics, which feel a little cheap. Also, if you have slightly greasy hands or you've been out filming all day like me and it's a little sweaty, when you touch it, you'll see fingerprints, which isn't a great thing. Same thing continues down in the center console also. The fan speed and the AC temperature controls are also touch based, and they have this touch based slider, which in theory works really well. When you try it, like when you're stationary or if you go to the showroom, it'll actually feel fairly responsive. The only downside is that when you're on the move, you still can't quite place your finger on the right spot to, just get it up by 1 point. I've been using it all day today, and it's just not been as intuitive as a knob would have been, but it still works fairly well. Of all the touch-based controls, this is probably one of the best implementations of it to date. Apart from that, the things that you'll notice, the touch screen. It's got the 10.1 inch touch screen back in the center console. For a while, Skoda was not able to do this because of its semiconductor shortage, and it had an 8-inch screen. But now we're back to the full-blown 10-inch screen, and this is actually a very nice unit. Here's all the functionality for it. And it's a fairly slick unit. As you can see, it is fairly responsive, and you get a fair amount of detail. This is consumption. Being a test drive car, you can see consumption figures are actually pretty bad. But if you get back out of this, you can see you have your vehicle lighting. If you go into your settings page and you go into lights, you'll be able to see that you can control your ambient lighting both in the footwell and the strip on the dashboard, which you can see is right there. But there's only one color, it's white, and it can't be changed to any of the other colors, so there's a little bit of customization lacking. Apart from that, this is the wireless Android Auto. It is fairly quick and responsive. It feels like a tablet, which is a really big compliment, and it's been relatively stable in the time I've been using it. I also like the illuminated gear selector on this automatic variant. That is the reversing camera feed, and even though it is night right now, it is a really low resolution feed. And honestly, for a car of this price, it should be much clearer. Also, should probably offer a 360-degree camera on this car. Another big change over the years is that Skoda has switched out the analog dials that the Kushaq was launched with a digital instrument cluster. Now, the instrument cluster looks quite nice and the display is quite crisp. However, I feel there is some wasted space because it's only the center part of the instrument cluster that's actually customizable and gives you different readouts, but even then it's not quite as customizable as something like the Hyundai Creta or the Kia Seltos' instrument cluster. And all that said, the quality of the dashboard for the most part is quite nice, and as you can see, the plastics used, they're not super cheap feeling. However, they are all hard plastics, as you can tell, and that's all the way around, even on the door cards. And this is something that you wouldn't quite expect from Skoda as a brand, because they've built a reputation of giving you really plush and luxurious interiors. So while the design and layout is actually very nice and practical, the feel in here is not quite at par with the design. When you reach down to the door pockets, which are reasonably sized, but you'll again feel the scratchy plastics down there. So the experience inside is dialed down a little bit, despite many of your touch points, such as your gear lever, your steering, and the seats themselves feeling quite premium. This signature trim level of the Kushaq has electrically adjustable front seats, and both of them also have a ventilation function. The Kushaq also gets a sunroof, but it is a single pane sunroof, and you can actually see the motor and mechanism of the sliding rails, so it does make it feel a little cheaper. And compared to something like the MG Astor or the Hyundai Creta, which have panoramic sunroofs, this does feel small and feels like a cost cutting that could have been avoided. At least at the top variant, it should have come with a full panoramic sunroof. Now quickly jumping into the back seat of the Kushaq. It is actually fairly comfortable back here. As you can see, the amount of knee room I have is quite good. I have about 4 inches of knee room. I'm 6 foot tall. This seat is set to my driving position. However, the keen-eyed amongst you will see that the headroom, it's not quite as good. I have about 1 inch, but it is still a little on the lower side. And this is even considering the fact that there is no panoramic sunroof. So the bulge for the sunroof sort of ends here. Another thing worth mentioning about the seating position is there is space below the driver's seat sort of to tuck your feet in. So you can sort of stretch out. The only thing is this backrest is not reclinable, and from its current position it's comfortable enough, but a little bit of additional recline would have made it a bit more comfortable, at least for taller passengers. While I was saying that the seating position in the Kushaq's rear is quite good, that is only when you're carrying two passengers at the back. The second you get a third one, and if they are my size, you will see there is limited footroom out here because the front seat mounts sort of eat in the way, so I have to stick my toes out. That's eating into the space of both passengers here, and my headroom basically goes down to like half an inch, which is not great. But again, if you're carrying only 4 passengers, then it's a much better experience. And talking of comfort, there is a nicely positioned armrest here, 2 cup holders. You get large door bins out here, and there are even speakers on the rear door, so that does help with the overall sound quality in the Kushaq. Other things at the rear, you get AC vents down here, which are quite convenient in our hot summers. We all appreciate having nice AC blasting at our face. You get 2 Type-C ports out here for charging. Again, very convenient, and a nice touch, as you can see, there's a pocket for your phone, which is a nice place to be able to store it when you don't want it in your hand, but still within reach. Now, safety is a priority out here, and you'll be able to see there is a 3-point seat belt even for the center passenger, as well as for the 2 outer passengers. And each of the passengers get their own headrest, which is another big positive.
While on the subject of safety, I'd like to mention that the Skoda Kushaq does not get any advanced driver assistance system or ADAS safety features on any of the variants, which is a little surprising considering how the competition does offer it now. That said, Skoda has taken safety very seriously, and there are 6 airbags available as standard across the range. You also get things like ESC, hill hold control, EDS, traction control, and rollover protection or rollover mitigation on all but the base variant of the Skoda Kushaq. This is what has allowed the Kushaq to receive a 5-star safety rating in both the adult and child crash test protection carried out by Global NCAP. Coming to the verdict, the Kushaq has a lot going for it. First up, there is the design, which is very smart and it has very handsome proportions as well, which means it should age rather well. And then there's also the interiors, which have very clean layout and it's very practically laid out, meaning it would be great in day-to-day usage. Then there's also the great amount of safety equipment that is equipped to the Kushaq as standard, which is something that a lot of us keep in our mind, especially when buying a family car. And lastly, there's the driving dynamics and that wonderful 1.5 litre TSI engine, which when combined give you a great driving experience. All that said, there are a few downsides to the Kushaq. First up, it's its dimensions, which while being more or less comparable to the competition, is a little short, especially in the width department and the length, which means your in-cabin space isn't as good as some of the competitors. Second potential concern could be the ride quality for people who are looking to be chauffeur driven. And lastly, it's the pricing, with the 1 litre TSI prices ranging from 10.9 lakh all the way to 17.2 lakh ex-showroom, and the 1.5 TSI ranging from 16.90 lakh to 18.80 lakh ex-showroom. This puts the Kushaq on the higher end of the midsize SUV spectrum, and while it isn't the most expensive by any means, for the money you don't get as many features as cars like the Hyundai Creta, Kia Seltos, MG Astor, Maruti Suzuki Grand Vitara, or even the Toyota Urban Cruiser Hyryder, and something like the Honda Elevate will undercut it in its pricing. For me, all this translates to the Kushaq being targeted towards two main groups of buyers. The first is someone who is looking for an upmarket mid-size SUV, has a relatively small family, and is primarily driving the car themselves. The second is someone who is a driving enthusiast but cannot quite splurge for having a second car dedicated just for driving. So the 1.5 TSI Kushaq will make up their one car garage that will cater to family running and their driving enthusiast side all at the same time. By the way, I'd love to know which of these mid-size SUVs you'd put your money down on if you had 20 lakh to spend. If I were to give the Kushaq a rating, it'd probably be 8 out of 10. And in case you want to see my up-to-date ratings for all the cars I have reviewed, check the comment section below for the document with all the ratings. I hope you found this review informative, and I hope to see you soon in another review. Until next time, cheers.